Hello. After listening to the story, write your impression in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. You never think it's going to happen to you. In every story about betrayal, there's always that nagging question in the back of your mind. How didn't they see it coming? But I'll tell you, it's not about not seeing it. It's about choosing to look the other way. Mia and I met in a crowded cafe 8 years ago. She was vibrant, her laughter infectious. It was her eyes, though, that drew me in first, bright, alive, as if the world couldn't contain her energy. I was the quiet one, the guy who'd sit at the back of the room and observe. Together, we balanced each other out. She'd pull me into her whirlwind of adventures, and I'd anchor her when she needed to slow down. Or so I thought. Our marriage wasn't the fairy tale people imagine, but it worked for us. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Looking back now, there were moments where things shifted. Not big, dramatic shifts, just tiny, almost imperceptible changes. But when you add them all together, they form cracks. Cracks I never saw until they turned into chasms. Mia was always busy, full of life, full of plans. I didn't mind when she dragged me to social events, though I preferred quieter evenings. Our life together seemed fine, good, even. We laughed, we talked, we lived. And then, somewhere along the way, things changed. It started with a game. At least, that's what I thought. Mia had recently become obsessed with a new mobile game. Nothing strange in that. She'd play it in bed before going to sleep, her face glowing in the blue light of her phone. At first, I found it amusing. She'd laugh at her wins, groan at her losses, and occasionally ask me for tips, though I wasn't interested. I didn't think much of it. People need hobbies, right? But then, she started getting serious about it. It wasn't just a silly game anymore. It became part of our routine, and her routine shifted. She'd spend hours glued to her phone, playing that game. I'd walk into the living room, and there she'd be, her focus entirely consumed. I figured it was a phase, a way to unwind after work, but it started creeping into other parts of our life. She'd play during dinner, during our rare movie nights, even during conversations. "It's just for fun," she'd say, when I gently poke at her. "It's addictive, sure, but it's harmless." Harmless. That word would come back to haunt me. Liam thought it was hilarious. He joked that Mia would soon be beating all the 12-year-olds online and become a world champion. "Maybe you should join her, Jack. Find out what all the fuss is about." He'd tease me whenever we met up for beers. I laughed it off, thinking it was no big deal. But there was something strange, something off in the way Mia played. She'd get notifications at odd hours, early in the morning, late at night. I figured it was part of the game system, pushing her to log in more. Still, it irked me. It wasn't like Mia to be so obsessed with something so trivial. Then, one night, while we were in bed, her phone buzzed. Not unusual. It happened all the time now. She picked it up, and I noticed her smile. A genuine, soft smile. A smile I hadn't seen her give in a long time. It wasn't for me, though. It was for whatever was on that screen. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, just someone from the game," she replied, brushing it off like it was nothing. "We have this group chat where we help each other out. You know, strategy tips and stuff." Her explanation sounded innocent enough, and I wasn't the jealous type. Mia was social, had plenty of friends, both male and female. A group chat for a game didn't seem like a big deal. But that smile, there was something in it that made my chest tighten. I let it slide. Why wouldn't I? It was just a game, after all. But soon, it wasn't just in bed or on the couch. Mia started taking her phone with her everywhere. I mean everywhere. She'd leave it on the counter when cooking, and it would buzz. She'd stop mid-sentence during a conversation to check it. Once, I even saw her take it into the shower with her. I'm not sure what was more unsettling, the constant interruptions or the fact that she never seemed to want to share the game with me anymore. One Saturday, while she was out with Sophie, I tried looking up the game myself. Just curiosity, really. I wanted to see what had her so hooked. But when I searched for it, I couldn't find anything that matched the description Mia had given me. There were similar ones, sure, but none that seemed to fit the obsession that had taken over her life. I shrugged it off, thinking I must have gotten the name wrong. The real turning point came a few weeks later. We were having dinner with Liam and Sophie, a casual night out, Nothing special. As we sat there, eating and laughing, Mia's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, quickly turned the screen away, and smiled to herself. I didn't think anyone else noticed, but Liam gave me a knowing look across the table. Not a look of suspicion or worry, just one of those smirks he always gave when he thought I was being too uptight. "Let her have her fun, mate," he said, nudging me with his elbow when we were alone at the bar later. That's when I realized something had changed. This wasn't just a game anymore. Mia was hiding something. That smile, that secretive look, those weren't for me anymore. I didn't confront Mia right away. Maybe I should have, but I wasn't prepared for the truth. Instead, I convinced myself it was nothing, just a phase. People go through phases, right? Couples hit rough patches, get distracted by hobbies, and come out fine on the other side. I thought we were no different. But the game, that damn game, became something more than just an obsession. It started intruding on every aspect of our lives. What used to be small moments of distraction turned into full-blown detachment. Mia was always on her phone, during meals, during conversations, during intimate moments. She'd excuse herself from the dinner table to respond to some notification, or worse, leave me talking to myself while she stared at the screen. One evening, I suggested we have a tech-free night. You know, just the two of us. No phones, no interruptions. "Let's cook something together," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "We could make that pasta you like, open a bottle of wine, and just relax." She hesitated, as if the idea of spending an evening without her phone was suddenly a challenge. "I've got this event going on in the game tonight," she replied, barely looking up. "I promised the group I'd help them. It's kind of important." That word again, important. Since when had a mobile game become more important than us? Still, I didn't push it. I told myself she needed her space, her own way to unwind. Maybe it was selfish of me to want more of her attention. I knew Sophie was feeding her this idea that everyone needed their own thing, their own space to breathe. I could hear her voice in Mia's responses sometimes, that same carefree tone Sophie had, dismissing anything that didn't align with her own sense of independence. Mia and Sophie had been friends long before I met Mia. They'd been inseparable, really, since their university days. Sophie was fun, sure, but there was something about her that I'd never fully trusted. She had this way of planting ideas, making them seem like they were your own thoughts. She'd always tell Mia things like, "Don't let yourself get stuck in one place," or "You should always be the most important person in your life." On the surface, it seemed like harmless advice, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized Sophie was the one pushing Mia to distance herself from me. It wasn't just Sophie, though. Liam started acting strange, too. He dropped comments here and there, little digs at me that didn't feel like his usual banter. We were at a bar one night, just the two of us, when he casually mentioned how relationships can get stale if you don't keep things exciting. "You ever think about spicing things up?" he asked, taking a sip of his beer. I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I don't know, man. Just life's short. You don't want to look back one day and realize you missed out on the fun stuff because you were stuck in the same old routine." It was an odd thing for him to say. Liam wasn't the type to get philosophical, especially about relationships. He'd always been a live-in-the-moment kind of guy, but this felt different. There was something behind his words, a hidden implication I couldn't quite put my finger on. "What are you getting at?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. "Nothing, man. Just saying. Don't get too comfortable." Comfortable. I hated how that word stuck with me. Was that what Mia thought? That we'd gotten too comfortable? Too predictable? I replayed our conversations in my head, trying to remember if she'd ever said anything like that. But she hadn't. At least, not directly. A week later, things took another strange turn. Mia came home one evening, looking a little too pleased with herself. She was holding a box, a small, sleek package wrapped in black paper. It wasn't a gift for me, though. I could tell by the way she quickly tucked it under her arm, almost as if she didn't want me to ask about it. "What's that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, just something for the game," she replied, avoiding eye contact. "What kind of game needs a physical package?" I laughed, expecting her to join in. She didn't. "It's just merchandise," she said quickly. A special edition thing. You wouldn't get it. Her tone stung, but I let it go. I didn't want to seem insecure or petty, but it was odd. I knew Mia liked to indulge in certain luxuries, but this felt different. There was something about the way she brushed off my question that bothered me. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Mia was already out cold, her phone still in her hand, as if she'd fallen asleep mid-play. I watched the soft glow of the screen on her face, feeling more distant from her than I ever had before. I thought about the box, the one she'd been so secretive about. What kind of game needed a package like that? It didn't make sense. I crept out of bed, careful not to wake her, and went to the living room. The box was still there, sitting on the coffee table. It wasn't sealed, just wrapped tightly enough to make me hesitate. My heart pounded as I unwrapped it, peeling back the black paper to reveal the contents. Inside was a sleek, black VR headset. I stared at it, confused. Mia had never mentioned anything about virtual reality. We didn't own a gaming console, and she'd never expressed interest in anything remotely tech-heavy. So why did she have this? And more importantly, what was she using it for? The headset looked expensive, high-end, the kind that's used for immersive experiences. A tiny shiver ran down my spine as I wondered just how far this game obsession had gone. Was this why she was spending so much time on her phone? Was the game evolving into something else, something that needed more than just casual swipes and taps? I put the headset back in the box, wrapping it as carefully as I could, my mind racing. I couldn't ask her about it without admitting I'd snooped. But there was no denying it now. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just a game anymore. The discovery of the VR headset gnawed at me, but I didn't confront Mia immediately. I thought about it constantly, turning it over in my mind, trying to make sense of it. Was it really just for the game? If so, why hadn't she mentioned it to me? I kept telling myself that I was overreacting, but the pit in my stomach wouldn't go away. Something was off. It wasn't until the following week that things took an even stranger turn. I came home early from work one afternoon, feeling drained from a long meeting that had gone nowhere. I figured Mia would still be out, maybe with Sophie, or possibly buried in her latest event in the game. But as I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, I heard something that stopped me in my tracks. Voices, faint but unmistakable, drifting from the living room. I froze, listening intently. At first, I thought Mia might be on a call, but the second voice didn't sound like hers. It was deeper, muffled through the walls, but there was a low, casual tone to it, like a conversation between two people who knew each other well. I walked slowly toward the living room, trying to keep my footsteps light. My heart was racing, a mix of curiosity and dread tightening my chest. As I got closer, I recognized Mia's laugh, a soft, almost flirtatious giggle that she rarely used anymore. It wasn't the kind of laugh you shared with friends, or at least, it didn't sound that way. I reached the door and peered in, my breath catching in my throat. Mia was sitting on the couch, the VR headset on, her hands raised as she interacted with the virtual world only she could see. But what struck me wasn't just her engrossed state. It was the fact that she was speaking softly to someone, her words interspersed with laughter and coy smiles. I stood there, paralyzed, watching as she talked to whoever was on the other end of her virtual world. It wasn't like a typical phone call. The way she moved, the way she spoke, it was intimate, too intimate. "Mia!" I finally croaked, unable to keep silent any longer. She jerked in surprise, pulling off the headset and blinking as if she was coming out of a dream. Her face flushed, her eyes wide with shock. "Jack, I didn't hear you come in," she stammered, quickly setting the headset down. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "No one," she replied, too quickly. "It's just part of the game, interacting with other players. It's nothing." I looked at her, my stomach churning with suspicion. It didn't sound like nothing. She stood up, brushing her hair behind her ears in that nervous way she did when she was caught off guard. "I told you, it's just the game. I was helping someone with a quest or whatever. Why are you making this into a big deal?" Because it was a big deal. Everything about this situation felt wrong. The VR headset, the way she had been talking to someone like they were right there with her. It wasn't just casual gaming anymore. There was a connection there, something more than just playing with random strangers online. Mia, this doesn't feel right, I said, trying to stay calm. You've been spending more and more time in this game and now it's like you're shutting me out. What's really going on? She glared at me, her expression hardening. What's going on is that I finally have something of my own, Jack. Something that makes me happy. Why can't you just let me have that? I didn't know what to say. She was right, in a way. I had been pushing her, expecting her to fit into my idea of what our relationship should be. But this wasn't about space or hobbies anymore. This felt like she was slipping away from me, into some alternate world where I didn't exist. She crossed her arms, clearly irritated now. You've been so obsessed with this game lately. What's your problem? I'm not doing anything wrong. It's just a game. But it didn't feel like just a game anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with doubts and questions. Who was she talking to? Was it really just another player? Or was there something more going on? I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the way she had reacted, the defensive tone, the hurried explanations, it all pointed to something deeper. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I knew I was crossing a line, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Mia was hiding something. While she was at work, I found her phone. I hadn't snooped through her stuff before, but desperate times, right? I opened the game's chat history, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the messages. At first, it was all mundane. Players discussing game tactics, congratulating each other on wins, that sort of thing. But then, I found something that made my heart stop. There was a private chat thread with someone named Aries. The messages weren't explicit, but they didn't have to be. The tone was unmistakable, flirty, playful, and far too personal for just a game buddy. Aries complimented her on how she handled some virtual mission, then followed it up with, "We make a great team, don't we? Maybe we should meet up in real life sometime. Take it beyond the game, winky face." I felt sick. It wasn't just the words. It was the fact that Mia hadn't shut it down. She hadn't even hesitated. Instead, she responded with, "Maybe, winky face. Let's see how things go." Let's see how things go. I dropped the phone, my mind reeling. This wasn't just a game anymore. This was emotional cheating. At least, that's how it felt. She was forming a connection with someone else, right under my nose, and using the game as a cover. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I knew I needed more. If I went in without all the facts, she'd just turn it around on me, make me seem like the paranoid one. So I decided to wait, to gather more information, even though it tore me apart inside. That evening, when Mia got home, she acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and then disappeared into the bedroom, probably to jump right back into her virtual world. I watched her, my chest tight with anger and hurt. I was losing her, and I didn't know how to stop it. The days that followed were a blur of tension and suspicion. I couldn't look at Mia without feeling the sting of betrayal, even though I still didn't have concrete proof. Every time she smiled at me or kissed me goodnight, I wondered if she was thinking about Aries, this faceless person who seemed to have stolen a part of her I once had. It didn't help that Mia continued to spend more time in the game. She no longer bothered to hide it. Most nights, she'd eat dinner quickly, barely making conversation before retreating to the living room with her VR headset. It was as if I didn't exist when she put that thing on. I'd sit on the couch, pretending to watch TV, but really I was watching her, studying her expressions, her movements, trying to pick up on any clues. What did Aries mean to her? Why was she pulling away from me? One Friday evening, I decided to test the waters. I suggested we spend the night together. Just the two of us. No VR. No distractions. I had it all planned out. A nice dinner, a movie we both loved, maybe a walk afterward if the weather held up. It felt like the right moment to reconnect, to remind her of what we had before all of this started. But Mia barely acknowledged the effort. "I can't tonight, Jack," she said, her tone distant. "I promised some friends I'd help them with a mission in the game. It's kind of important. Maybe tomorrow?" I tried to hide my disappointment, but it must have shown on my face because she sighed, setting her fork down with a clatter. "Don't give me that look. It's not a big deal. We can spend time together tomorrow. It's always tomorrow, Mia, I snapped, the frustration finally boiling over. It's never now. What happened to us? You used to want to do things together. Now you're glued to that headset like it's your whole life. She rolled her eyes, clearly tired of the conversation. Don't be dramatic. I just need some space, okay? I've been stressed, and the game helps me unwind. It's not like I'm out doing anything crazy. But you are, Mia. You're checked out. You're here physically, but it's like I'm living with a ghost. Every night, you escape into that virtual world, and I'm left alone. Her face hardened. This again? We've talked about this. It's just a game, Jack. You're blowing things way out of proportion. I wanted to scream, to shake her and make her understand how much this was tearing me apart. But instead, I swallowed the anger, forcing myself to stay calm. It's not just the game, Mia. It's you. You're different. You're distant. I feel like I'm losing you. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood up, gathering her plate and heading for the kitchen without another word. The conversation was over, and once again, I was left with more questions than answers. The next day, I decided to take a different approach. If Mia wouldn't talk to me, I'd find out what was going on myself. I knew snooping was wrong, but I was desperate. I needed to know the truth. So, while Mia was out running errands, I logged onto her computer. She always left it open, and I knew she kept the VR app synced with her laptop. If there was anything suspicious going on, I figured I might find it in her messages. It didn't take long. The private chat with Aries was still active, but now it had evolved into something far more intimate than just friendly banter. They talked about their lives outside the game, work, hobbies, even personal struggles. But what really stung were the flirtatious exchanges, the suggestive comments that bordered on inappropriate. I wish we could meet up in real life, Aries had written a few days earlier. I bet you're just as fun outside the game as you were inside. And Mia had replied with, maybe one day. Who knows where life will take us, winky face? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't just a game anymore. This was emotional infidelity. She was sharing parts of herself with this stranger that she wasn't sharing with me. And the worst part? She seemed completely at ease with it, like it was perfectly normal. I printed out the chat history. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I needed proof, something tangible to confront her with. Maybe, deep down, I hoped that seeing it all laid out in front of her would make her realize what she was doing. Maybe it would snap her out of this trance she seemed to be in. That night, Mia came home, and everything felt eerily normal. We ate dinner in silence, as usual, and then she slipped into the living room with her VR headset, just like every other night. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the printed pages in front of me, my heart pounding in my chest. Was I really going to do this? Was I ready for the fallout? I took a deep breath and walked into the living room. Mia was already immersed in her virtual world, her hands moving in the air as she interacted with things I couldn't see. I stood there for a moment, watching her, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. Mia, I said, my voice shaky but firm. She didn't respond. I wasn't sure if she couldn't hear me or if she was just ignoring me. I stepped closer, raising my voice. Mia. Finally, she took off the headset, looking annoyed. What? I'm in the middle of something, Jack. I held up the printed pages. We need to talk. Her eyes flicked to the papers in my hand, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of something. Panic? Maybe? It was hard to tell. She stood up slowly, crossing her arms defensively. What's that? I handed her the pages. Read it. She hesitated for a moment before taking them, her eyes scanning the text. As she read, her expression shifted from confusion to anger. You went through my messages? She asked, her voice rising. I had to, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. You weren't being honest with me. I knew something was going on, and now I have proof. She threw the papers onto the couch, her face flushed with rage. It's just a game, Jack. Jesus, you're acting like I've been cheating on you or something. This is insane. Is it? I shot back. Because from where I'm standing, it looks a hell of a lot like emotional cheating. You're talking to this guy like you're more than just friends. You're flirting with him, planning to meet up? I never planned to meet him, she shouted, cutting me off. It was just talk. God, Jack, you're overreacting. It's not like I've done anything. I stared at her, my heart aching. But you wanted to. That's the problem, Mia. You wanted to. She fell silent, her jaw clenched. For the first time, I saw the guilt in her eyes, the realization that she couldn't talk her way out of this one. I don't know what to say, she finally whispered, her voice cracking. Neither did I. After that night, something shifted between us. Mia and I barely spoke. The air in our home was thick with unspoken words and resentments, as though we were tiptoeing around the truth we were both too afraid to confront. The confrontation about her messages with Aries didn't lead to a dramatic, tear-filled argument or a breaking point like I expected. Instead, it left us in a strange limbo, a purgatory of emotional distance and avoidance. Mia didn't apologize, and I didn't demand one. Maybe that was my mistake. I let her deflect, let her anger overshadow my own hurt, and in doing so, I allowed the situation to fester. We went through the motions, eating meals together, sleeping in the same bed, but we were just two people occupying the same space. We had become strangers in our own home. Mia, of course, continued her nightly routine with the VR headset, and I grew more withdrawn. I spent more time at work, burying myself in projects and staying late at the office, anything to avoid going home to the void that had become our relationship. But the more I stayed away, the more I could feel the threads of our life together unraveling. I didn't know how to stop it. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to anymore. That's when Lauren stepped in. Lauren had always been my rock at work. We worked closely on the same projects, bouncing ideas off each other, pushing each other to do better. She was the kind of person who could light up a room with her energy and optimism, and I'd always appreciated having her around. But in the weeks following my confrontation with Mia, I found myself relying on her more than ever. She became my escape, a breath of fresh air in the suffocating world I now lived in. It wasn't intentional, at first. I wasn't looking for anything more than friendship. But Lauren noticed my change in demeanor almost immediately. "You've been off lately," she said one afternoon as we worked on a presentation together. "Is everything okay?" I hesitated, not wanting to burden her with my problems. But the truth was, I had no one else to talk to. Mia had distanced herself so completely, and I couldn't exactly confide in any of our mutual friends without raising suspicions. So, I told Lauren the truth. "Well, part of it. It's just, things at home aren't great," I admitted, keeping my tone light, like it wasn't eating me up inside. "Mia and I have been disconnected." Lauren gave me a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry to hear that. Relationships can be tough, especially when life gets in the way." "Yeah," I muttered, not wanting to go into details about Aries or the virtual world that had come between us. "It's been hard, but I'm trying to figure things out." Lauren didn't push for more, which I appreciated. Instead, she did what she did best, distracted me. She cracked a joke, lightened the mood, and soon we were laughing again. The weight of my troubles temporarily lifted. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. With Lauren, everything felt easy, effortless. And that's when I realized just how far I'd fallen. I was developing feelings for her. It started out small, just an appreciation for her kindness, her humor. But it quickly grew into something more. I found myself looking forward to our time together, seeking her out at the office, texting her after hours. And the scariest part? I didn't feel guilty. Not at first. It wasn't like I was cheating on Mia. I told myself I wasn't crossing any lines. But the more time I spent with Lauren, the more I found myself wondering what life could be like with someone who made me feel seen, valued. I wasn't sure when I had stopped feeling that with Mia, but now that I had a taste of something different, I couldn't ignore the void in my marriage. Still, I wasn't willing to admit to myself that I was walking down a dangerous path. I convinced myself that this was just a harmless crush, that I could enjoy Lauren's company without it meaning anything more. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The breaking point came one evening when Mia had a work event to attend. It was rare for her to have an actual work commitment outside of the house these days. Most of her socializing happened in the virtual world. But this was something she couldn't do online, so she was gone for the night. I was alone in the apartment, nursing a beer and staring blankly at the TV when my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Lauren. Lauren, hey, want to grab a drink? I'm at the station with some coworkers, and it's pretty dead. Could use some company. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I knew I shouldn't. I knew this was crossing a line, but I was so tired of feeling alone, of being neglected, that I found myself typing a response before I could stop myself. Me, sure. Be there in 20. The drive to the bar was filled with conflicting thoughts. What was I doing? Was this really the right thing? But by the time I walked through the door and spotted Lauren at a small table in the corner, all my doubts melted away. She smiled at me as I approached, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt wanted. We ordered drinks, and the conversation flowed as easily as it always did. We talked about work, joked about office drama, and before I knew it, we were on our third round. I could feel the alcohol buzzing through my veins, loosening my inhibitions, making me bolder than I usually was. At some point, the conversation shifted, and Lauren leaned in closer. You deserve better, you know, she said, her voice soft but steady. You're a great guy, Jack. Anyone can see that. I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in tone. What do you mean? I mean, she hesitated, then sighed. I don't know what's going on with you and Mia, but I just think you deserve to be with someone who really appreciates you. Someone who sees how amazing you are. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know how to respond. I could feel my heart racing, my mind spinning, and for a moment, I considered leaning in, closing the gap between us. But then a familiar image flashed in my mind. Mia, sitting on the couch with her VR headset, lost in a world that didn't include me. Suddenly, the reality of what I was about to do hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't just walking a fine line anymore. I was about to cross it. I pulled back, taking a deep breath. Lauren, I can't. I'm still married. She looked at me, her eyes filled with disappointment, but also understanding. I know, she whispered. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. We finished our drinks in silence, the air between us heavy with unspoken tension. When we finally parted ways, I felt a strange mix of relief and regret. I had avoided making a terrible mistake, but the truth was, I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold on. At home, Mia was already asleep when I got back. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her for a long time. She looked peaceful, like the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But I knew that peace was an illusion. Our marriage was hanging by a thread, and I didn't know if it could be saved. For the first time, I considered the possibility that maybe it wasn't meant to be. In the days that followed, I tried to shake off the feelings that had bubbled to the surface with Lauren. I told myself it was just a fleeting moment of weakness, an understandable reaction to the isolation I'd been feeling at home. After all, it wasn't like I had actually cheated on Mia, right? But the more I tried to convince myself of that, the harder it became to ignore the truth. I was miserable, and so was Mia. We had reached a point of no return, both stuck in a holding pattern that neither of us seemed willing to break. Our conversations, when they happened at all, were short and mechanical. She was always preoccupied, always distant. Even when she was home, it felt like she wasn't really there. And in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop wondering about Aries and what the hell was really going on between them. Then one day, something happened that tipped everything over the edge. It started innocuously enough. It was a Saturday, and I was home all day while Mia was out running errands. Or at least, that's what she told me. I didn't bother questioning her anymore. What was the point? We were two people living separate lives under the same roof, and pretending otherwise was just exhausting. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through TV channels, when I heard a soft ping from Mia's phone on the kitchen counter. She had left it there when she went out, and I hadn't even noticed until it buzzed again and again. Curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at the screen, and my stomach dropped. 3 missed messages from Aries. I wasn't proud of what I did next. But in that moment, my rational mind took a back seat to the whirlwind of suspicion that had been building for weeks. I picked up the phone and entered the passcode, something I had never done before, but she'd been careless enough to use a code I knew. Our wedding date. The screen unlocked, and there it was, the text thread with Aries, staring me in the face like a neon sign. I scrolled up, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands shaking as I skimmed through message after message. At first, it was just small talk, much like I had seen the last time I confronted her. But as I kept scrolling, the messages became more intimate, flirty, and then explicit. Aries wasn't just some random person she was playing games with online. He was much more. They talked about their sessions together in the VR world, how he made her feel alive, how their virtual meetups left her wanting more in real life. I felt sick. It wasn't just a fling. Mia was emotionally, and likely physically, invested in this guy, and she had been for weeks, maybe months. The pieces started clicking into place. The reason she was always so distant, why she spent every night in her virtual world instead of with me. It was him. Aries had her heart, or at least, whatever was left of it after our marriage started falling apart. I didn't want to keep reading, but I couldn't stop. The messages were like a car crash. I couldn't look away, even as the realization tore me apart inside. I scrolled all the way to the top of the thread, wanting to see when it had started, and that's when I noticed something strange. Their first conversation wasn't about VR or video games, or even anything remotely flirtatious. It was about art. Mia had sent Aries a picture of a painting that I recognized instantly. It was a small oil painting we had hanging in our bedroom, an abstract piece we had bought on our honeymoon years ago, the kind of thing you'd only notice if you had been in our home. A chill ran down my spine as I processed the implications. This guy, Aries, wasn't just some anonymous stranger on the internet. He had been in my house. He had been in our bedroom. I scrolled back down, looking for more clues. And then I found it. A few messages buried among the flirty banter. Mia talking about a dinner they had together. In person. Mia, I loved our little dinner last night. You were right. The wine was perfect. We should try that place again sometime. Maybe next week? I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. Mia had lied to me. Repeatedly. While I had been sitting at home, wondering where she was or who she was talking to, she had been out with this guy. Having dinner, laughing over wine, God knows what else, and she had been brazen enough to do it right under my nose. I felt a rush of rage so intense that I nearly threw her phone across the room. How could she do this to me? After everything we had been through, after all the years we had spent building a life together, she had thrown it all away for some guy she met in a virtual world. But then something even more disturbing hit me. If Aries had been in our house, then it wasn't just about Mia anymore. This was personal. He had invaded my space, my home, my life, and I hadn't even seen it coming. I sat there, numb, staring at her phone like it held all the answers I was too afraid to face. The clock on the wall ticked away the minutes, but I couldn't move. My mind was racing, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, betrayal, and confusion. What was I supposed to do now? Confront her? Demand answers? Or was it already too late? Hours passed, and eventually, I heard the sound of Mia's key in the front door. My heart lurched as she walked in, casual as ever, her purse slung over her shoulder, a soft smile on her face. "Hey," she said, glancing over at me on the couch. "What are you doing?" I stared at her, unable to speak, my mind screaming at me to get up, to confront her, to make her explain everything. But the words wouldn't come. I was paralyzed by the enormity of what I had just discovered. Mia must have noticed the tension in the air because she frowned, her smile fading. "Jack, is everything okay?" For a split second, I almost lied. I almost pretended that everything was fine, that I hadn't just uncovered the truth about her and Aries. But I couldn't do it. Not anymore. I stood up, my legs shaky, and met her gaze. "Who is Aries?" I asked, my voice low and steady, though I could feel the storm brewing inside me. Mia froze. For the briefest moment, I saw panic flash across her face, but she quickly masked it with confusion. "What? Aries? He's just a friend. Why are you asking?" "Don't lie to me," I snapped, the anger bubbling up to the surface. "I know everything, Mia. The messages, the dinners, The fact that he's been here, in our house. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see the gears turning in her head, scrambling for an excuse, a way out. But there was no way out. Not this time. I can explain, she finally said, her voice trembling. Explain what? I demanded. That you've been sneaking around behind my back with some guy you met online? That you've been lying to me for weeks, maybe months? That you've been letting him into our home while I was at work? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel any sympathy. Not anymore. Jack, please. It's not what you think. Then what is it? I interrupted, my voice rising. Tell me, Mia, what the hell is going on between you and Aries? She stared at me, silent, her face pale and drawn. And in that moment, I knew. She wasn't going to give me an answer because there was only one answer. The truth was right in front of me, and there was no denying it anymore. Mia had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and no amount of excuses or explanations could change that. I felt something inside me break. I had spent so long trying to hold on, trying to fix what was broken between us, but now, it was all too clear. There was nothing left to fix. Our marriage was over, and there was no coming back from this. The silence that hung between us felt like a living thing, pressing down on me, suffocating me with the weight of all that was left unsaid. Mia stood there, her lips trembling, but the tears that brimmed in her eyes didn't move me. Not anymore. I had given her everything, my love, my trust, my life, and she had thrown it all away for someone she barely knew. A stranger who had slithered into our lives like a snake. Her mouth opened and closed as if searching for the right words, but I already knew there were none. What could she possibly say to make this better? To make it go away? I wasn't sure I even wanted to hear whatever excuse she was about to offer. Mia, I said, my voice cold and flat. I don't want an explanation. I don't want your apologies. I want you to leave. Her eyes widened in shock, as if she couldn't believe what I was saying. She took a step toward me, her hands outstretched in a gesture of pleading. Jack, please, it's not what you think. No, I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. No more lies. No more excuses. I don't care what your reasons are, Mia. You betrayed me. You lied to me. You brought him into our home. You were sneaking around while my voice cracked, the anger giving way to a wave of raw pain that I had been holding back for too long. While I sat here like an idiot, thinking we could still fix this. But there's nothing left to fix, is there? Tears spilled down her cheeks now, and for a moment, a tiny part of me wanted to reach out and wipe them away. The part of me that remembered the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who had once been my whole world. But that woman was gone, and the person standing in front of me now was a stranger. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I never wanted to hurt you, Jack. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I let out a bitter laugh. You didn't mean for it to happen? So what, Mia? It just happened? You just accidentally started seeing someone else? Accidentally let him into our home? Accidentally lied to me over and over again? She winced at my words, her hands dropping to her sides in defeat. I don't know what to say. I made a mistake. A horrible mistake. A mistake? I repeated, incredulous. A mistake is forgetting to pick up the groceries. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You chose to betray me. She looked down at the floor, unable to meet my gaze, and for a moment, we stood there in silence. The anger inside me had burned out, leaving only a hollow ache in its place. I felt exhausted, physically, emotionally, mentally. There was nothing left to say, no more fighting to be done. I'll pack my things, she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. Good, I replied, my tone clipped and final. You should go. As she walked past me, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, anger, and a deep, aching loss. This was the end of everything we had built together, the end of our marriage, of our life together. And the worst part was, I didn't even feel like I knew this woman anymore. The Mia I had married, the Mia I had loved, was gone, and in her place was someone I barely recognized. I watched her walk up the stairs, her footsteps heavy with regret. Part of me expected her to turn around, to say something, anything, that might change the course of what was happening. But she didn't, and I didn't stop her. I sat down on the couch, staring blankly at the wall as I listened to the sounds of her packing upstairs. The rustle of clothes, the zipping of a suitcase. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. Eventually, she came back down, her suitcase in hand, her face pale and drawn. She hesitated at the door, her eyes searching mine one last time. "I'm sorry, Jack," she whispered. "I really am." I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to speak. I just nodded, not really knowing what else to do. And then she was gone. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and the house fell into a deafening silence. I sat there for a long time, staring at the door, half expecting her to come back, to walk through it like nothing had happened. But she didn't, and she wouldn't. I wasn't sure how much time had passed before I finally stood up, my legs feeling like lead as I walked over to the kitchen table. The remnants of our life together were scattered around the house. Her coffee mug still sitting on the counter, her favorite blanket draped over the back of the couch. It was as if she had just gone out for a quick errand and would be back any minute. But she wouldn't. Not this time. I sat down at the table, my head in my hands, the weight of everything crashing down on me all at once. I had lost her, and not just in the physical sense. I had lost her long before tonight. I just hadn't been willing to admit it. As I sat there, my mind racing, something caught my eye, a small flash of light from the corner of the room. I looked up and saw Mia's phone, still sitting on the counter where I had left it earlier. It buzzed again, another message from Aries. For a moment, I considered smashing it, throwing it against the wall in a fit of rage. But then I realized something. There was no point. Whatever anger I had felt toward Aries, toward Mia, it was useless now. The damage was done, and no amount of fury or destruction would change that. Instead, I picked up the phone and unlocked it one last time. I scrolled through their messages, not to torture myself, but to find something, anything, that would give me closure. Something that would explain why she had done this, why she had thrown our life away. And then I found it. It was an old message, buried deep in their conversation, from a few months back. Mia had sent Aries a picture of a book I had given her as a gift on our first anniversary. It was a special edition, one that had meant something to both of us. She had written a note on the inside cover, something sweet, something I had thought she cherished. But the message attached to the picture was what hit me the hardest. "Mia, I used to think this was the most meaningful gift I'd ever received. Now, it just feels like a reminder of the life I'm not sure I want anymore." I stared at the screen, my heart breaking all over again. She had been unhappy for longer than I had realized. And in her unhappiness, she had turned to someone else. Someone who made her feel something I apparently couldn't. In that moment, I understood. I wasn't blameless in all of this. I had missed the signs, had ignored the growing distance between us. But that didn't make her betrayal any easier to bear. I put the phone down and leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all crashing down on me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. Mia was gone, and I was left to pick up the pieces. Alone.